Representation, Cultural Representations and Signifying Practices, edited by Stuart Hall, is a foundational text in cultural studies, exploring the pivotal role of representation in constructing meaning and shaping social realities. Hall, a key figure in cultural theory, curates a collection of essays that delve into how culture, language, and power intersect to create and disseminate meaning. The book begins with the premise that representation is central to how humans make sense of the world. Representation involves the use of language, symbols, and images to stand for or signify things, ideas, or experiences. Hall and the contributors argue that meaning is not inherent, but constructed through representational systems, which are shaped by cultural conventions and power dynamics. This process of meaning making is deeply embedded in systems of language, which operate through structured rules and codes. Hall emphasizes that representation is not a passive reflection of reality, but an active process of constructing it, shaping how individuals and groups perceive and understand their social world. One of the core theoretical frameworks discussed in the book is the semiotic approach, which originates from the works of Ferdinand de Saussure and Roland Barthes. The semiotic approach posits that signs comprising the signifier, the form of a word, image, or sound, and the signified, the concept it represents, are the basic units of meaning. Meaning arises not from a direct link between the signifier and the real world, but from the relationships between signs within a system. This perspective highlights the arbitrary and socially constructed nature of signs, emphasizing that their meanings are subject to change across different contexts. And over time, the contributors explore how semiotics can be applied to analyze cultural texts, including advertisements, films, and other media, revealing the underlying ideologies that shape representation. Another critical approach discussed in the text is the discursive framework, heavily influenced by Michel Foucault. This perspective focuses on how knowledge and power are intertwined in the production of meaning. Discourse, in Foucault's terms, refers to systems of language and practice that constructs subjects, objects, and social relations. The book demonstrates how discourses shape what is considered true, normal, or legitimate in society, often privileging certain groups while marginalizing others. For instance, representations of race, gender, and class in media and cultural practices are shaped by dominant discourses that reinforce existing power hierarchies. The contributors argue that challenging these discourses is essential for creating more equitable and inclusive representations. The book also examines the role of ideology in representation, drawing on the works of theorists such as Louis Althusser. Ideology refers to the set of beliefs, values, and assumptions that shape how individuals interpret the world. Representation is a key site where ideology operates, as cultural texts often encode dominant ideologies that appear natural or commonsensical. The contributors analyze how media and popular culture reproduce these ideologies, normalizing unequal social relations and reinforcing stereotypes. However, the text also highlights the potential for resistance, arguing that representation can be a space for contesting and transforming dominant ideologies. One of the strengths of the book is its emphasis on the intersectionality of representation. It explores how categories such as race, gender, class, and sexuality intersect to shape experiences and identities. The contributors analyze how these intersections are represented in cultural texts, often revealing the complexities and contradictions within dominant narratives. For example, representations of blackness or femininity are not monolithic, but vary across different cultural and historical contexts. The book underscores the importance of examining these intersections to understand how power operates in representation and to create more nuanced and inclusive analyses. The book's practical applications are a key feature, as it provides tools for critically analyzing cultural texts and practices. Through case studies and examples, the contributors demonstrate how to deconstruct representations to uncover their underlying assumptions and ideologies. For instance, the analysis of advertisements reveals how they construct idealized notions of beauty, success, and consumerism, often perpetuating unrealistic standards and reinforcing social inequalities. Similarly, the examination of film and television shows highlights how narratives and character portrayals contribute to shaping public perceptions of identity and difference. Representation is also examined as a site of struggle, where meanings are contested and renegotiated. Hall and the contributors argue that cultural texts are not fixed, but open to multiple interpretations, creating spaces for audiences to challenge and subvert dominant representations. This perspective aligns with Stuart Hall's encoding-decoding model, which highlights the active role of audiences in interpreting media texts. Audiences may accept, negotiate, or reject the meanings encoded in cultural texts, reflecting the dynamic and contested nature of representation. The book also addresses the implications of globalization for representation. In an increasingly interconnected world, cultural texts and practices circulate across national and cultural boundaries, leading to hybrid forms of representation. The contributors explore how globalization complicates traditional notions of identity and belonging as individuals and communities navigate multiple and often conflicting cultural influences. They highlight the potential for cultural exchange and creativity, while also acknowledging the risks of cultural homogenization and the dominance of Western media in shaping global representations. Hall and the contributors emphasize the ethical and political dimensions of representation. They argue that representation has real-world consequences, shaping how individuals and groups are perceived and treated in society. Misrepresentation or underrepresentation of marginalized groups can perpetuate stereotypes, discrimination, and social exclusion. Conversely, inclusive and diverse representations can challenge dominant ideologies, foster empathy, and promote social change. The book calls for a critical engagement with representation, urging readers to consider its implications for justice, equity, and human dignity.